up until this point in the hearing, it was a fairly sober discussion, debate, talk about legal concepts and interpretations and all of this. At this point, we veered off into clown world.
Yes, we did.
There is a member of Congress who I have never heard of before. I don't know if you have, but by all accounts, she's trying to get admission into the squad with AOC and Ilhan Omar because she was as unhinged as I've ever heard a congressman before. Sydney Kamlager-Dove from California then took her turn to make her statement. Let's hear this.
I now recognize the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member. I think there's a quick video that I have.
You don't need to be a genius to realize that Trump's not talking about babies that come from Norwegian vajayjays. No. He wants to white out the Constitution so that he can whiten America. That's what he's planning to do here.
All right, I just thought since, the South Africans are in the news, I would play that.
So we're in a hearing before Congress. She plays a clip of a stand-up comic who's not even an American citizen making a vulgar joke about how Trump is racist because he wants only white immigrants. How inappropriate and offensive was that?
Well, I'm just wondering if the Norwegian medical establishment had some kind of a kickback to her so that could get mentioned. That was the most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. So first of all, Trevor Noah is just not funny. Calling him a comedian is a slander against comedians that are actually funny, like Jerry Seinfeld and Bill Burr, and people who can actually tell a joke and make you laugh. I don't understand people's fascination with him in the first place. But why you would cite him as some kind of authority on the 14th Amendment as it applies to birthright citizenship, I have no idea. But, clearly she was trying to advance the argument that denying people birthright citizenship is racist. But the comments she was making were racist because immigrants are not a race. So this affects anyone. And the only reason that the most significant portion of migration coming to the United States right now comes from Latin America, Asia, and Africa is because of geopolitical conditions. We don't know if there's going to be a natural disaster, a war, anything that drives other groups of people to come here. And let me say, kamlager-dove, I had not heard of that name before, and when I first heard it, I thought it was an experimental music group like Bachman Turner Overdrive or something like that.
That sounds better than this. Yeah. All right. I'd like to tell you it got better after that for her, but unfortunately it got much, much worse.
No, it got much, much worse for her and for all of us who were there.
So listen to this.
So I want to talk about the times that gave rise to the 14th Amendment. It was 1868. There was the aftermath of the 4-year divisive, destructive Civil War that killed roughly 750,000 soldiers, or 2% of the population. Resistance in the form of Reconstruction, a massive tsunami in a soon-to-be U.S. territory that killed 70 people, and in the aftermath of the 1868 Louisiana Constitution, which gave black men the right to vote and a public education, you had the Louisiana Massacre, where black people were murdered trying to vote. As people would say from my hood in L.A., the white folks went cray-cray.
The white folks went cray-cray. Is that appropriate to be talked about in the Congress?
Of course, Brian. That is a special legal argument that's only brought out in the most serious and sober of circumstances. What a buffoon this woman is. I mean, not only is she historically and legally ignorant. I mean, yes, the Civil War did happen, but the suggestion that people who are the same color as her don't get due process in the United States, isn't that assertion kind of negated by the fact that she's sitting there in Congress with everyone else across the color spectrum who is a member? I mean, you were sitting in that room with me. It was like the Rainbow Coalition. So this whole notion that this is all about keeping America white is offensive. And even if that were the case, I think it's a little too late for that if you're looking around the room.
So if your appetite for this kind of buffoonery hasn't been satisfied, we have one more clip of her.
Origin story of the amendment is as applicable now as it was then. You had a Democratic president impeached in 1868 and a Republican president impeached in 19 and 21. You had political violence in 1968 with the Louisiana Massacre and an insurrection that happened here in 2021 where Capitol Police were speared with American flags. You had a tsunami in Hawaii in 1868 and a fire again in 2023. You had an economic turndown in 1868 and you have $15 eggs under Trump right now in 2025. Same environment, toxic, hostile, destructive, deadly.
Matt, I lost track of how many absurdities are in that statement.
I don't even know where to begin. The assertion that the end times are near because this parallels 1868, I don't understand where that comes from. I'm just going to leave that one aside.
Just to compound how unprofessional that was, this is a hearing regarding immigration policy, and yet she's got this checklist. She's got to reference January 6th. She's got to blame Trump for inflation, which has nothing to do with the topic at hand. But it's like she's got to get in these party talking points.
No, I found myself wanting to take a dozen of those $15 eggs and pitch them in her direction at the time. I'm joking, just for anyone, because we know what the political climate is like now. Yeah, it was shocking how many things she raised that didn't have anything to do with the subject being debated, but, she was attempting to weave a particular narrative, and that has something, it has to go something along the lines of Donald Trump is the second coming of evil itself or whatever. I mean, it just the whole testimony from beginning to end was uninformed, absurd, and quite frankly, offensive. Now, I may have interpreted that way because, look at me, I must be cray-cray.
Now, anyone who's watched these kind of hearings before, there are often members of Congress who will make wacky statements and things, and oftentimes the other congressmen will just ignore it and move on to the next person. Chip Roy, who was the chair of this committee, and Tom McClintock, from a Republican from California, couldn't resist making a comment on Ms. Kamlager-Dove's absurdities. So check this out.
And with that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Well, I would just observe for the record that the phrase white people be cray-cray is itself cray-cray. And I will now recognize the gentleman from California.
And also racist, of course. I was wondering how long it would take the Democrats to play the race card, and I want to thank my colleague from California for satisfying that curiosity.
So after Representative McClintock made that statement, I was watching Ms. Kamlager-Dove, and she had kind of a irritated look on her face, and she packed up her little briefcase and stormed out of there. So,
yeah. All I think you have to do in order to figure out the difference in approaches there is pay attention to the hysterical, absurd, and quite frankly disjointed manner in which Ms. Kamlager-Dove made her point, and then Mr. McClintock very politely, very professionally, without getting hysterical, pointed out the absurdity in her argument in a way that, would pass muster at any social function that you could possibly go to, and nobody would consider it the least bit impolite. So it's I do not understand why this is always tied to race, why there's a suggestion that this is a fundamental American principle, because if you're talking about fundamental American principles, then allegiance to the country should be of importance. We all said the Pledge of Allegiance when we were in school. And of course, Congressman Goldman got up there and said, allegiance is a fuzzy concept that you can't ever figure out what it means. And, tying this to race, as I said before, is just offensive because immigrants, migrants, whatever you want to call them, even illegal aliens, are not a race.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Immigration Reform Law Institute, go to IRLI.org. If you found this information useful and you'd like to support the show, go to IRLI.org/podcast. You can also hear this show on Apple Podcasts, Rumble, and Spotify. And don't forget to check us out on all the major social media platforms. Thanks again.